They're huge.
Huge.
I think we're up on
Thief territory.
Instagram and Facebook.
All right, we're just getting going, everybody. If you're just tuning in.
Okay, that shows we're live. Cool.
Justin is in. Justin.
I think we're good.
All right.
Morning, everyone.
Welcome to the 034 Motorsport Platinum Hour live chat.
When do we go platinum?
I don't know. I mean, it needs a name, so I think I've proposed Platinum Hour a few times. What number is this?
88.
88.
Go back in time.
Yeah. If we were a DeLorean.
And a measure of speed.
Yes. I'm Javad Shadzi, the CEO of 034 Motorsport, and this is Nate Stewart, our Director of Engineering. And we are here to answer all your automotive and 034 Motorsport questions. And anything else you want to know about, we're happy to talk about. Happy Valentine's Day. I think it should be called Milfentine's Day because, like, really, I mean, it's really about MILFs, not about anything else. So, but hope you have a special day with your Valentine. Anything else? What else am I missing? All right, we just got to get some questions.
It's a Monday.
Yeah. Oh yeah, we take a no BS approach.
Yep.
I always say this, but in case anyone's
We get to script your intros.
we like to cut to the root cause, to the heart of the issue, and we really don't like bullshit. So we have a strict no bullshit policy here. And if you love us, please tell us. That would be great. And if you hate us, also let us know so we can try to do something about that. Because there's no point in you just being all angry and upset on your own, alone.
Right.
It sounds very sad, actually. Maybe you've been drinking alone because you're so upset at us. Please bring that forward so we can drink together, if all goes well. And we're able to address your reasonable concerns.
Yeah.
Sometimes people want really unreasonable stuff from us, and that gets tougher.
Arm says he loves you.
Oh,
thanks.
no, thank you, Aram. I actually already knew that, but it's always nice to hear it again.
Somebody's saying dynamic DILF plus today.
Yes, that would be nice. All right, we have a couple questions from last week. I think someone's asking, any plans on swapping a 4.0 or 2.9 twin turbo into an SQ5?
Nick is putting these in.
Nick, you could just ask me. I'm right here.
What's the
What would that be called? That would be like Hyper MILF plus, Hyper MILF cubed, something. I really don't see the point. Not to nitpick, but there's just no point in putting a 2.9 TT into an SQ5.
Yeah, no, I was just thinking the same thing.
That's
The RS motor, I mean, it's got some differences, some compression ratio changes here and there. But
if you're restricting the stock turbos, then sure.
Yeah, for the amount of effort.
But the 4.0, that would be really nice.
Sure.
Your airbags might just explode with that kind of power and torque. But no, we do not have that plans. SQ5s with E85 even stage 1 power are just redonkulous.
Yeah. It would be, so to go into the weeds a little bit, it would be a little trickier than what we did with our B8, just simply from a electrical and network arrangement. We would have to go to the later gen 4.0.
my question's safe.
So I only see two here.
There's no question.
Jesus Christ.
But it'd be a tricky one. You'd have to use the new motor out of the RS, like the RSQ or something, like the RS6.
Yeah, that would get pretty expensive.
And it gets,
it's probably like 100,000.
the whole swap by the time you die.
Yeah,
and then trying to make it work. So, no, we don't have any plans to do anything like that at this time.
All right. Beyond upgrading to a high pressure fuel pump and getting an ECA.
Ethanol content analyzer.
Okay. Oh. Can you talk to us about running E40 safely on the B8 platform? How often should people be changing spark plugs in comparison to 93? The fuel system cleaner additives work for fighting injectors from getting gummed up from the ethanol. Do oil change intervals drop your recommended 5K when running E40?
Drop below 5K.
Yeah, drop below. That's a lot of questions. Yeah. Okay, let's just start with the first one. How often should people be changing spark plugs in comparison to 93? It could be more frequent. Typically, I would just wait until you get a misfire
Yeah.
of some kind.
Yeah, I mean,
But if you want to just do it every 10,000 miles to be safe, you can. Spark plugs aren't that expensive, but they're also pretty nice dinner, by the time you change 6 spark plugs.
yep.
So, yeah.
Yeah, no, that's not
It's
right. I
up
mean,
to you.
it's totally, it's a tough answer too, with not knowing what plugs we're talking about. Some last longer than others. The way it's driven, it's hard to put
Yeah.
for any of these. That's going to apply across all these questions. Is how do you drive it? What are you using the thing for? What kind of conditions are you running in?
Do fuel system cleaner additives work for fighting injectors from getting gummed up? I mean, I don't think we have proof of that. It probably can't hurt. There's a lot of snake oil out there when it comes to additives. In general, I would say the entire additive section at the auto parts store is snake oil.
One thing you do need to just keep an eye on is additives have an unknown octane manipulation.
Yeah.
It's a new medium being injected into your motor that you don't know the octane of necessarily, or how it's going to interact.
I think one of the best things you can do for your injectors is go wide open, throttle often and frequent.
Yeah.
Because you really, flow a lot of fuel. And if you imagine, that buildup happens when the injector's just opening a little bit each time, and so those totally blanking.
Deposits.
The deposits have a chance to stick. When you go wide open, you have that kind of flow through the injector.
Yep. All your temps get up higher.
Then it gives a chance to clean the injector. You can also run, this could be snake oil. Chevron claims they have Techron, so there's the different gas stations or suppliers or brands add additives. So that gasoline is a very strictly formulated, regulated, controlled product. But you can add other stuff to it. So if you want to add some fuel injector cleaner and that kind of stuff, you can. Again, how well it works, I don't know. Maybe Consumer Reports has done something on this. But you would really need someone, to take a scientific approach with evaluating that. But again, drive the car. That's the best thing you can do. And after a while, the money you spend on additives, you could probably buy new injectors.
Yeah. And to that end too, we say it, I think, every week now at this point, but injectors are basically a maintenance item in these cars. So I don't know what your mileage is at now.
Yeah.
But I'd say if it's getting up over 50K, probably start looking at get some injectors budgeted in there in the next.
And then oil change intervals real quick. Yes, ethanol does get more in your fuel.
Yeah, you just got more fuel going through the motor, so as a percentage, you're just gonna have more in the oil.
Yeah. But the bad parts of it should evaporate. If your oil's up to temp.
Yep.
The watery.
Water cycle. I wouldn't say less than 5K is any. It would. There's no reason to go less than 5,000 miles. I would.
You could send your oil out to Blackstone.
Yep.
And kind of just get an idea. Go to 3,000 miles and then take a sample, send it to Blackstone.
Yep.
See what they say. If they say your oil looks fine, maybe send another sample at 5. Well, I'm not a big proponent. I don't sell oil. I'm not an oil supplier. Obviously we have an auto repair facility here, CTF Automotive, and we still don't try to con people into like having way more oil changes than they need. That's like some shops' entire business model. And certainly, this whole thing of like you got to change your oil every 3,000 miles. I mean, guess who came up with that? The people who sell oil change products. So, but yeah, there is, you can have an oil analysis done. You can actually be smart about it. All right.
And that kind of all those questions kind of show where with the no bullshit approaches, you're going to get nuanced answers that aren't going to be a definitive thing. So all of this comes down to conditions and data driven.
Generally, I would say anyone that gives you a really confident answer on any of this kind of stuff, they're just trying to sell you something, or they have some ulterior motive on kind of creating this real certain reality that doesn't exist. Yeah, I don't know. So it's if you go to the nutrition store, you know, there's all these supplements, and for sure this supplement, you know, fixes all your joint pain. No, it doesn't. But it could maybe have some impact.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's very doubtful. So, but they want to sell you the stuff, so they make it sound real good. What impact do your B9 S4 S5 tunes have on gas mileage? Does it vary based on stage of tune? Oh, and is stage 3 coming? Woot woot. All right, cool.
Impact on gas mileage should be essentially none. We do not alter or manipulate any of the part, throttle, fuel targets, and driving. So there should be, you know, no impact from stock on mileage.
The impact, there is an impact. It's at peak power.
Yes.
We use more fuel.
We do use more fuel because we're, you know, more air.
Because of physics.
You've got to complement the airflow with the fuel.
Yeah. So if you took two B9s and you took a stock one and you assume that some people are probably gonna be talking about, but both cars were identical, which they never are, and then you drove them both at wide open throttle for 5 minutes. One with stock tune and one with our stage 1. The stage 1 car would use more fuel because it's making more power.
Yep.
We haven't figured out how to magically produce power from nothing. So we're left with combusting the energy inside either gasoline or E85.
Yep.
And so, yes, the more power you make, the more fuel you have to use. It's like if you're camping and you want to make a fire twice as big as your buddy's fire, you're going to basically use twice as much wood.
Yep.
Especially if you're using the same kind of wood.
Yep. And on that note, you know, the alternate fuels will have an impact. So an E85 calibration will require more fuel just because it's a different type of fuel, different density, different, you know, Lambda essentially. So, you know, E85 you can expect to use anywhere, you know, probably 25 to 30% more, depending on your content.
And again, based on the physics, it's just less energy.
Yeah. And if the stock vehicle had an E85 calibration, it'd be exactly the same.
And stage 3 is coming soon.
Yep.
Yes, we don't have a date, but it's by any stretch of the imagination could be considered soon.
Yes.
In fact, just a short time on TikTok, and it could be here before you know it.
Back to TikTok.
Yep. I guess we have Instagram Reels now, which is also very similar to TikTok.
This one was pretty good.
Flex fuel is incredibly common for American cars. Why is flex fuel not found on Audis, and why is it so hard to add it in the aftermarket?
Yeah, it's, you know, I don't know why it's not more common other than, you know, we have E85 in abundance in America, whereas in Europe it's not nearly as much.
Yeah, I mean,
so that's
Chevy, Ford can do it because their biggest market is the U.S. They're American based, but I think for Audi they've done it before.
They've done, you can get the B8.5 A4. It's a lot of a handful of 2 liters that they've produced.
I don't know what the numbers are, but I have to imagine if you're Audi and you're doing market research, the number of prospective Audi customers that care about flex fuel is so small. Yeah. It's just not worth it. And when they did it for the B8, the B8.5 A4 and all road, that's when ethanol was surging in the U.S. I mean, that was like, you know, the late 2010s, and everything was ethanol, and there was, you know, everyone thought that gasoline was bad and running out or whatever, and so ethanol came online, and then you don't really hear anything about ethanol anymore. I mean, I think natural gas got really cheap, and all the fracking and stuff, and so the shift really moved away from.
Oh god.
The focus just moved away from E85 in general. So it's hard to do, technically speaking, because you're adding this functionality in the ECU.
So yeah, that was just that. So the second part of the question is why is it so hard to add? And that's it's a very complex thing to add correctly. You've got another input. First off, you've got to somehow get into the ECU. So yeah, this comes back to how these ECUs are programmed, I guess, from the factory is. There are literally dozens to hundreds of software versions for a model of car. Every one of those is basically built and compiled and is laid out differently, has slightly different software structure, different, potentially different hardware at the ECU level. So you've got to first account for all that to know how you can get software into these controllers without interacting negatively with something else and without actually doing what you want. You've got to make sure you've got the hardware to do it on the board of the ECU. And then you've got to work on, mapping and accounting for it and somehow injecting your code and your maps in where they need to interact with the stock, strategies. So it's incredibly difficult to add from the ground up something of that level. So that's why it's not commonly done, and why you'll see generally a static fuel mapping where it's like it's an E85 file or it's a gasoline file. There's no easy way to just say turn on flex fuel. Some ECUs have some semblance of knowing about different ethanol contents, but it varies widely between what they happen to leave in the calibration in the software.
It's a big engineering task. Yeah. Requires a lot of heavy lifting from an engineering standpoint.
Yep.
I have a B9 SQ5 on E85 Stage 1. No other mods. Amazing. Well, great. That's a great thing to hear.
I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Yes, thank you. Let's see. B9 SQ5, rear front sway bar plus end links. Question mark. Billet subframe, differential inserts, ETA, engine mounts. How's the stage 3 stuff? All right. B9 SQ5 front rear sway bars are coming. They're in manufacturing right now. We are done engineering and developing those. They're phenomenal. They completely transform the driving experience of an SQ5. I think it's probably going to be a few more months. So hang in there. But there's nothing else like it on the market, and certainly nothing else with the level of engineering and evaluation that we've put into it specifically for the SQ5 market. Let's see. Billet subframe and differential inserts. Those are also coming. I don't have a ETA for those, but they're in basically the manufacturing stage. Engine mounts, we will release basically A4 engine mounts soon, and we're evaluating how those fit for the S applications. The S4, S5, SQ5, they have stiffer motor mounts from the factory, and we are making some yet stiffer ones, density mounts, as an upgrade. But we may offer the A4 units as an upgrade for the S4 as kind of like a street density version sooner, but we don't want to offer them if they're not any kind of upgrade. They are solid rubber that we get rid of all the hydraulics and stuff like that, so they should be much more reliable, more longevity. But typically we always offer a performance enhancement as well with these mounts. And I think we mentioned stage 3 stuff.
Stage 3 stuff.
C8 A6 3.0 tuning. Is this happening?
We've definitely talked about it. Yeah, we've definitely talked about it a lot internally. So we don't have a roadmap for release right now. It's a much smaller demographic. It's a really cool combo though. It's a DSG 7-speed attached to the 3 turbo.
Awesome.
But yeah, it is on our radar. I don't have any definites to give you.
We have just a tremendous amounts of interest in our tuning and various applications.
I think the first 15 questions today were, when's this one being released? When's that one being released? Updates for this and that. So all these applications we're not covering yet that we're trying to.
Can the Simos ECU on the B8.5 supercharged 3.0 TFSI determine individual cylinder lambda with the wideband O2 sensor? What would be considered maximum injector pulse? Timing for our engine, asking for a friend, cylinder number 5.
It can to an extent. It doesn't do cylinder level trimming, just because of the your gas is getting merged in the 3 cylinders per bank. In the catalyst, even if it's pulse timed correctly, you've still got a mixture of fuel mass getting to the sensor. So it's not at a cylinder specific trim level that it's using the Lambda sensor.
I mean, that's not really necessary.
Yeah.
It's the benefit of that's not that big.
Right. Yeah. So what you'll see bank dependent trim. You'll see bank 1 and bank 2 trims, short and long term, and then there'll be different.
Which is a level of resolution that actually prevents damage from happening.
Right. As far as what would be considered an injector pulse timing for our engine, that is not an answer that anyone can give you with any single number. That number varies very widely across the different RPM ranges. So it's all about how much time you have during that crank event that you're allowed to basically have an injector open spring fuel before you get to top dead center and before you get to that ignition event that's coming up.
Yeah.
So the number could be 15 to 5. You know, it's impossible to give an answer.
That's a big challenge with fueling any motor is you have this inverse relationship to the amount of time you have versus how much fuel you need to inject. And so as you need to inject more fuel, you have less and less time.
Yeah, the higher you rev a motor, especially with DI. In the old, I mean, port injection stuff, you could just sit there and pile fuel on top of the valve, and it would just kind of wait till the valve opened. So you had a much longer window until the valve was.
Yeah, you have the entire crank rotation.
With direct injection stuff, the higher you rev it, the less time you have to inject.
And you already have way less time in the first place because you can't inject fuel when the piston's going down or on the exhaust stroke, or you can inject fuel just as the piston's coming up, compressing the air fuel mixture.
Yeah, so your overall window is dramatically smaller, or it's generally halved compared to a port injection.
I always blew my mind these F1 motors that rev to 20,000 RPM. Granted, they don't run like normal fuel injection systems, but
you can look through the errors. So there's
the amount of time you have to inject at 20,000.
And there's errors of F1 motors where they've got injectors, above the trumpets. Basically, it's just a fog of fuel that is just breathing in. Because there's just no point in at the time of trying to get a runner or.
But then they went to direct injection pretty way before streetcars did.
But they're able to they size everything appropriately, and everything's engineered to operate at that RPM and power.
But you can go online and there's calculators for this. But if you want to just have some fun with a calculator, determine the amount of injection time that you would have at various RPM ranges, and it's a function of crankshaft. How long does it take the crankshaft to do 360 degrees at that particular RPM? And at 20,000 RPM, it's infinitesimally small amount of time.
Yeah, we're not there. Yeah, it's quite small.
But even from like 6,000 RPM to 9,000 RPM is a substantial drop.
Yeah. But towards red line, probably this 7 milliseconds is probably going to be your limit. I need to do the math to give you something more concrete, but it's right around there.
Yep.
In the mid range and below, you again just multiply by 2 if you're at 3,500. So that's kind of you get some pretty big ranges.
I want to try E85 on your stage 1 tune, which I'm currently running on 93. Can you explain the proper order sequence of emptying the 93 tank relative to filling E85 and flashing the new file?
So we have, I think, a number of clip-outs related to this.
Yeah, this should be plenty, but we'll just talk about it real quick. You want to get an ethanol content analyzer in the car. There's various options that involve installing an ethanol content sensor in your fuel line, which is pretty easy to do. And then you can either get a gauge in the car or there's like Bluetooth apps. This is critical because you don't want to guess at whether you have ethanol in your fuel lines or whether it's made it to the fuel injectors. And keep in mind, you could have a tank full of E85 and fuel lines filled with 93, and that doesn't mean that you can run your E85 tune or that your motor is getting E85. It could take 5, 10, 20, 30 minutes. You don't know, right? So you just find out by using an ethanol content analyst. Typically, you want to run your tank down close to empty, although it doesn't have to be empty. But you could have a gallon or two left.
Empty is reasonable to get, for sure.
And then simply fill your tank with E85 and wait until you see the ethanol content go above, about E60 to E65.
Yep.
Around here, we typically see it settle in around E80, and that's with a basically an empty tank of 91 and a full tank of E85. And of course, on our cars, we'll just keep running E85. Tank after tank after tank. There's essentially no gasoline left in it.
Yep.
And we see about E80, and that's around here at the stations we use. But our tunes are designed to function on the E85 file as long as your content's above about E60 to E65. So that's good news. You don't have to stress out about being right at E85. You probably won't ever have E85 in your tank. You might.
I've seen only a few that have been higher than E80.
Yeah. I mean, you could have E90.
Yeah,
You know,
there's some that
it
go
could happen.
pretty
but
high.
typically, what we see is the content is lower than E85, and that's okay.
And you'll see on the pump too, it'll say like minimum content of like E70 or E60 depending on the pump.
I think if you know, as long as you're seeing E70 to E85, you're golden. And actually, having slightly less ethanol is a good thing because that means your fuel system won't be quite as stressed. But anyways, that's it. So if you have any other further questions, let us know.
Yeah, and feel free to reference we've got a whole 034 Motorsport Uncut channel, which is all cuts of videos. And this is, I'm sure this is on best practice to sort through these.
The breast videos are on our other channel, the milk channel. Will a 4-inch intake have less performance with stage 1 tune compared to your B9 3.0 T 5-inch intake? I mean, theoretically, the 5-inch will flow more than the 4-inch, but at stage 1 power levels, I really don't think there'll be much difference.
Yeah, I mean, what you're going to notice, it's getting pretty small difference in the pressure drop at the turbo. There is some that you can measure there for sure. So yeah, you will have a more performant intake, but it's not going to. It's tough to answer this one because it's not going to result in more power at the wheels because we are targeting a boost pressure that the ECU is able to hit, and the difference in the pressure ratio and the pressure drop across the turbo is going to be pretty darn small to isolate that out between the two.
There's a fundamental problem with this question. This question is 100% focused on the inches of the intake, which it's not even clear what that means, but it sounds like you're referring to the air filter. Ours has a 5-inch air filter, so you're saying there's an intake out there with a 4-inch air filter. Now, you know, if you there's other variables that come into how well an intake flows. For example, air filter itself, the restrictiveness of the media. So if you had a 4-inch air filter that had a solid aluminum filter media, then it would flow 0 CFM and it would make no power. Like your engine wouldn't even start. So the inches of the filter are just one of the many variables that take into account. The other is the air box design, how shrouded is the air filter. So you could have a 6-inch air filter inside a tiny air box that's shrouded. So the air box is essentially blocking the filter. And it doesn't matter if you have a 10-inch air filter. If air can't get into the filter, then it won't flow more than a properly designed 5-inch. So I think we would need to know more about like exactly what you're proposing. But our intake with a 4-inch filter would still flow with our 4-inch filter, which we have designed and engineered, would flow very well for stage 1. Our 5-inch flows very well, and we were able to easily fit a 5-inch filter in there with no shrouding, and so we did that. But you're probably not going to see the benefit of the 5-inch filter unless you go above stage 1 power levels. Now, if you're talking about some other brand, other competitor product with a 4-inch filter, I can pretty much assure you that it won't flow as good as ours because I believe ours is best flowing on the market, but we would need to know more. So just don't get too caught up in the fact that, you know, what inch size is the filter. There's a lot more to it.
Yeah, we've got to follow up to that question.
We have to follow up on the 85 swap question, but it's handled in the cutout. The question is when do you flash the file? And as Joel mentioned, you're good to go once you're above that like E60 to E65 level.
Yeah, now you can do some light driving on either file, but it's better to. I mean, you also don't want to drive around on your 93 file with ethanol in the tank either, right? So whether you flash the 85 and just kind of drive to the gas station real mellow, or you fill up with the 85 and then you flash it once you know you're back home and you're sitting in your driveway and the numbers come up. It's not like you know there's some flexibility on which tune you're on and which fuel you have, unless you're talking about making power.
Yeah.
Once you start producing power, you have to be on the file. But the the ECU can idle the engine and do real light just fine with kind of either fuel. But there is a transition period, and you can make sure you're in a good spot to be able to make that transition.
That's true for any, even going from like 91 to 100 octane.
Yeah.
Or, anytime you're changing octanes, you want to make sure that you're at a point you've got the right fuel in the motor. Thankfully, ethanol, it's actually easy to tell because you can put a gauge on it. It's actually trickier to go to like a 100 octane file and know when you've got 100 at the motor.
I've heard rumors about your own high pressure fuel pump internal upgrade for the B8.5, B8 and B8.5 S4 3.0T.
Yep.
With all the bad Autotech units, is this still in the works by you guys? Well, it's not a rumor. We've talked openly about it here.
Our pumps have nothing to do with the Autotech. So.
No. But we have been working on our own for about a year now, and we're imminently going to release it. So I think product just showed up or is just showing up. We're receiving and processing it. Yeah. So these are our own design, totally new design. I mean, they're very similar because there's only so much.
Yeah, it's a piston and a
room you can work with inside there. I'm sure there's zero.
This is ideally zero amount of room.
You can make a difference within like 0.1/10,000th of an inch. So knock yourself out.
But yeah,
it's coming. I mean, do we have a release for that?
There's some final testing.
Yeah. So we should be releasing in like a week or two.
We've got a bunch in cars right now. So
yeah, did that happen?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, good. So yes, coming soon, sorely needed. We need them here because we do a lot of these upgrades on our service departments, and we have been bitten by this quality issue by the competitor as well. So, and it's very unfortunate, but stuff like that happens to everyone.
This is pretty good. That's props for you. Good question.
Do you need a? Sorry, I was just answering questions. Do you need an upgraded intercooler when using your Stage 2 B8A4? Yes. We would say it's required. I mean, the car will drive without.
We do say it's required on the website.
Yeah, it's one of our required specifications because the turbo is producing so much more heat.
Yeah, it's a lot more heat. The stock intercooler on those is quite small. So yeah, we do require it for Stage 2. And we strongly recommend it for Stage 1.
Yeah, we'll get blown out.
Yeah, we got a lot of questions coming in.
Real quick, what's the ETA for SüperDüper flow upgrades for X34 and P34 intakes? Any speculation on price?
This is B9 related.
Yes.
So this is our SüperDüper upgrade for the B9 3.0T, not the 2.9.
So there's zero flow.
Oh yeah. So this does flow 0, even though it's 5 inches. It flows nothing. To my earlier point. So this will be a
For later.
oh, okay. This is the stock. So this is the SüperDüper version, which is much bigger than the stock format. So the stock, this is our stock replacement. So we will offer both of these. This is the stock piece right here. So you can see just the size difference and the amount of girth that you gain, which is really where the benefit of this is. They're both the same length, but the girth's substantially increased. This format won't allow factory installation. So you can see this is the factory airbox pipe, and ours is 50% bigger than that. So in order to install this in a car, you would need our SüperDüper upgrade, and then you would need our airbox upgrade SüperDüper element. So this works with our current B9 3.0T, P34 or X34 intakes. It replaces the inlet piece that the airbox came with so that you can accommodate this bigger, more girthful connection to the SüperDüper pipe. This will flow substantially more than this. In fact, this fits inside, easily fits inside.
Adjust the whole stock.
This will be a great upgrade for when we get into Stage 3 stuff. And we will have inserts that accommodate the bigger turbos. So we're very excited to release this product. This is exactly what the 3.0 tuning market needs. I know there's a competitor product out there that's all silicone, and I mean, it's great that they brought product to market. That's not the way we would do it. This is the way we will do it. This will be a cast aluminum piece, and then this this will be carbon fiber.
Carbon fiber for X34
And
or
X34.
silicone for P34.
And then we'll have a silicone for the P34, and we will offer either.
This is a prototype version of the standard size.
Yeah. So this is our standard stock sized replacement. It's not stock size. It's much bigger.
Stock hose inlet.
This is the stock one. So you can see, also major increase in girth. What we've done is we've maxed out, in the space, and connecting to the factory style. So this would install with a factory airbox pipe, or our aftermarket one that you would have gotten with our B9 X34 P34 intake. This I would say, I'd recommend this for anyone who's kind of wants to stay stage one and
Stock turbo, yeah.
Stock turbo, and doesn't want to put more money into their airbox and stuff like that. The SüperDüper will be critical in order to make big turbo power. The turbo inlets on the bigger turbos, they'll be even bigger than this.
So turbo inlet restriction is a huge deal when you start working on the edge.
This is where the air goes in. And if you're shrouded and restricted, I don't know. Imagine if you exercise. Imagine putting something over your mouth and having to breathe through it. The bigger, the more free flowing it is, the better. And that's how your turbo feels as well. So exciting stuff. I believe we'll have this one first. The stock size is further along in the manufacturing journey, and then we just recently finalized SüperDüper, the engineering, and that'll be coming as well. So yeah, exciting stuff. If you guys have any questions, feel free to follow up.
Oh, the logos.
Yeah. So as far as price, the pricing's not too bad. Actually, we took a look at what some of the competitors are charging. We'll be able to come in below that. I'm not sure why they're charging so much money. We will publish all flow numbers in CFM. I think as far as how much power will this handle, I think it'll, with our airbox and our filter, it'll easily accommodate, any of that kind of stage 3 hybrid power.
That's all through the TTs, 7 stuff we're dealing with now.
It's the power limit of this intake is going to be very, very high. I mean, I'm confident you could easily make 1,000 horsepower through this.
Yeah, it's all. I mean, again, it's all pick your restrictions and pick your compromises. There's a question about how ours compares to IE's. Ours, we did compare, and ours is a little bit bigger. It's about a millimeter bigger. So they probably flow very similar. We inadvertently made it a little bigger.
Easier to install.
Yeah, and ours just will bolt in really nice, cleanly. We'll have all the supporting parts. Now, if you have someone else's intake, we obviously can't support that. The problem with this configuration is it's all kind of homogeneous in the front of the motor there. So you could adapt our SüperDüper inlet to someone else's intake, which would require some unknown custom.
We have no control at that point. Will it be ours? It will not be ours.
No.
You can heat test.
No, this is rapid 3D printing.
We make everything very bright for the rapid prototype stuff because it's a lot easier to see from every angle.
Yeah.
Once it's in a dark engine bay, you need to either get photos of stuff or see what is exactly landing where. It's a very vibrant color.
Someone's asking, how long can I run E85 until my fuel lines and mechanical components corrode? I mean, I don't believe they will.
Yeah.
I mean, we have no
data to indicate that there's been any issues with any modern vehicles in a very long time. We've not seen any issues like that on any of our vehicles for any of our test stuff or any of our customers we've ever heard from.
I mean, there's the basis of the question assumes that the fuel systems will corrode, and we don't have evidence of that. Typically, the factory fuel systems, most of the components are either some type of nylon or plastic, which is very fuel resistant, or stainless steel. and you see stainless steel all throughout the fuel system. Rarely do you see like raw machined billet aluminum, which is more of an issue in the aftermarket. So when it comes to E85 compatibility, this is really more of an aftermarket problem. If you get like, just some guy in his shop is machining up billet aluminum fuel rails or using extruded fuel rail stock, even then the amount of corrosion you'd get on raw billet would be pretty minimal, but that's when you would see some type of corrosion. But again, we've never seen a factory fuel system that corroded. If you want to go online and look around and find a Volkswagen or Audi that has had fuel system corrosion from running E85, please send it our way. No concerns with injectors. Injectors are extremely fuel resistant.
I mean, it depends again, just as much as what fuel you're running through it, gasoline-wise, as to what contaminants and or buildup you can get on injectors. That's not necessarily corrosion, but you can get some buildup. Like we're just exactly what we were talking about this earlier with deposits and things.
I think E85 does have more deposits than fuel, and it has less of a solvent effect or action than gasoline. And you don't see people like in shops cleaning parts with E85.
So that's a good point, and it is the thing. Gasoline is an extremely good.
If you want to clean something, you put it in gasoline, and it gets fucking cleaned.
Yeah,
I
it
mean,
stinks, but
just give it a try in your shop sometime. But there are issues with E85 and deposits and gumming up. Now, that does not mean that these injectors are not E85 compatible.
Or that they're corroded somehow. No. It's a completely different effect.
Yeah. So I'd love to challenge everyone out there to think critically. So when you hear someone say something, take all the elements that created that thought and try to break them up and see, okay, well, there is some failure mode with injectors. Someone is saying that the injector wasn't E85 compatible. Well, what does that mean? Why isn't it E85? Oh, the injector's stuck. Well, is it stuck because of gumming and deposits? Okay, well, that's not an E85 compatibility issue. That's an issue with E85's propensity to deposit and gum up. There is no such thing as an E85 non-gumming injector. It doesn't exist, right? So all injectors are E85 compatible, but there's a gumming issue. So you just really need to break this stuff down. There's just so much sloppy thinking on the internet, and it just runs rampant. And just be a little skeptical every time you hear something. Ask some questions, and just try to push back a little bit when you hear this. As a company, how do you guys prioritize what platform to tune? Honestly, I'd say at the most basic level, it's what do people want to buy. Who's out there, and how many of you want to buy it. There are times when we see the potential in the platform and nobody else has yet. And so in those instances, we choose to invest, and it's more of a build it and they will come approach. But those opportunities are going to be based on, what's the value proposition to the customer, and kind of doing this a little bit with the Q7, like nobody's doing anything for it.
Yep.
It's a great platform. A lot of the stuff we do already will work for it. And with 5 or 6 modifications, it's going to completely transform the car.
Very similar with the SQ5 as well. It was not.
And the SQ5 was, I mean, we joke about it now. I mean, I was skeptical, but we slowly moved forward, and now SQ5s are a thing.
There are some other outside things that we may not have control over, or might kind of steer us as far as there might be some technical limitations on a given platform, particularly new ones. If we're able to jump on it and calibrate and tune on it right away.
Yeah, that makes a big. Can we even?
What's the effort required to start doing that kind of work? That usually won't stop us from the chassis stuff, the hardware parts.
Another factor is how many cars out there, the VIO, the vehicles in operation.
Yep.
For example, we decided to do R8 stuff. There's actually like 10,000 R8s out there. So it's actually a decent group of cars, but we've kind of gone back and forth on the new RS6 because there was like a couple hundred cars. Maybe there's 700 now. I don't know. It's still not a lot. The good thing is that the level of modification on RS cars is quite high. Like at least half of them get modded. So that's good. But when the new Mark A GTI comes out, we're all because there's, you're talking 10, 20,000 cars a year or whatever for 6 years, and that's going to be like a cornerstone of our business. So. But we have to be careful. We can't invest a lot of our time, energy, and resources in applications that nobody wants to buy products for.
Yeah, I mean,
that would be really bad.
Fun to work on Halo cars all day, but if you can't move enough of the products to make it viable, then you can't provide those products anymore.
We're coming up on 15 minutes before we gotta end. So if you want to dive into that Dyno discussion.
All right, so do you want to pull that up real quick?
Okay. So we had. Let's talk a little context first and make it loaded.
Yeah. So this, I don't want to offend anyone or make anyone upset, but we just wanted to address this because we saw this kind of developing this weekend, and basically someone out there has proposed that, and I'm just by even talking about it, we're going to bring more attention to it. But I think it's worth it.
Well, let's just talk about like what, how you can compare.
Well, let me first just talk about what. So someone out there has proposed of getting 3 or 4 different cars with 3 or 4 different tunes on them. These are different cars with possibly different modifications, and has offered to dyno them at their shop so that the world can see the comparison of how does IE and 034 and APR and Unitronic compare to each other.
For the good of the community.
For the good of the community. So this is well intentioned. I don't think anyone is trying to, hurt anyone or be bad. And supposedly this person doesn't even sell off the shelf tuning. And so if I'm being honest, I don't know this person. I haven't spoken to this. I imagine there's an element of they're interested themselves. There's an element of wanting to help the community out. And this certainly is bringing a lot of attention to them and putting them at the center of, some type of spotlight. So there's some benefit there as well. But the kind of the core fundamental problem that we see with this is you cannot do a valid, forget scientific, just a valid comparison of 2 or 3 different cars or any cars to each other and draw any kind of firm conclusion on how is that tune performing on its own. The only way to do this correctly would be to have, one car. Start with one car. The modifications do not change on the car throughout. And then you would flash each car with the different tunes, and preferably you do it all in the same day as quickly as you could back to back. And then you would control and normalize for temperature and any other environmental changes during the test.
Even same day, you have to go up. We do this all the time with our calibration and our back to backs. You have to go up and then back down the same route. So as the day progresses, what you never have the same conditions throughout the day.
But different cars make different power, and so we're gonna show you just something that we measured recently. This is right off something that we did.
Yeah, this in the last couple of weeks we had a fresh example. When we were baselining RS5 stuff, we had a couple of different RS5s that we've tested over the course of the last couple of years for hardware products and whatnot. And we have seen a huge delta in stock powers on stock cars, stock calibration.
We talked about this before. It's not the first time we've
as controlled as you could get across multiple cars. As an example of what we're kind of dealing with, so I can make it bigger here so I can read the numbers. It's going to be hard to see. This is like straight off the dyno from this morning.
But just describe,
Yeah. So, you're seeing like almost 20 wheel or over 20 wheel horsepower difference on some of these between stock cars.
These are 2 stock cars with the same.
There's 3 stock cars here. 3 different cars.
3 cars. Okay.
We're looking at a peak of 422 wheel on, 422 torque, 387 torque, and 405 torque. 401 wheel, 363 wheel.
Yeah, so what's the variation on that?
It's variation stuff because it's pick your peak.
No, but at the peak, let's just talk peak power.
Yeah, we're talking at least 30 wheel.
So there's a 35 wheel spread between 3 different cars. Now these are all, and again, these are identical stock cars with the same wheels and tires. This is the other thing is wheels and tires, well, especially tires, make a big difference. So if you take a car, and let's say you have 50 series sidewalls, and then you do a run, and then you immediately swap it out with some 20 series sidewalls, it's going to change the power delivery. That's the saying where the rubber meets the road. All that power goes through that tire. So that tire is the only thing connecting the dyno roller to the torque being produced in that engine. And so even if you change the air pressure in that, it will change. And we know this well because we used to do dyno competitions, and we got really good at figuring out what tire and what pressures to bring. So, again, if this particular person had these three cars show up, you're going to tell me that you can do a valid comparison on a 35 wheel spread from stock, and then you're going to amplify that with tuning.
And yeah, right. Tuning and whatever mods, whatever changes have been made, whatever. I had another example here. We had a B9.5 S4 that we were doing some calibration validation on that had a small boost leak we ended up finding out at the end of things. So we're chafing our tails, working on power deviation stuff. Come to find out it was a hardware issue with the car that was undiagnosed and wasn't enough to throw a code. It was,
Well, then there's that too on top of that. And then I think another factor is I've heard basically whose dyno is it being done on? Like their dyno?
It's their dyno.
Who's essentially a type of competitor to all these shops.
To some degree.
It's not an independent
right
test by any means.
No, there's spec or there's some scare.
Yeah. There is some conflict of interest. Not saying it's full. I mean, it's not like this testing is all being done at integrated engineering, but you have someone who possibly has a vested interest in the outcomes of these tests. And I think this person has also been pretty outspoken about the quality of off-the-shelf tuning.
Yeah, they like the latest one was I think it was a 10-year-old could provide some calibrations.
That's what this person said?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's the person who's doing these tests said that a 10-year-old.
Yeah, it's that level of
wait, can we hire these 10-year-olds? Oh. God, that was great. I'd love to hire about 10-year-olds to come do tuning for us. That'd be amazing.
So I mean, whatever they may or may not think that it's really hard to make it a truly independent at any level type of test with that level of outward hostility towards everyone else in the market.
It's not an independent test, no matter what they try to do. Now, with that said, if anyone would like to reach out to us to get our input on how to do this, at least, with some level of validity, we'd be happy to talk to you about it. I think as it stands, the way this is being conducted, who knows? Maybe our tune comes out on top. But I would say we wouldn't recognize or support the results of
we're
this.
not going to run around trumpeting it that anything.
Even if we're the highest, I would still say this is a really flawed comparison.
Yeah, there's so many variables that are not being accounted for in any way.
So I mean, I would say look into science experiments as far as doing controls properly, normalizing data. I mean, if you can do this with a control and with normalized data, that would be a great start. Now, the bias and that kind of stuff, is a whole nother story.
It's a whole other thing.
And typically, whoever was conducting this experiment, it would be double blind. So whoever's providing the car doesn't know what tune is on the car, and then whoever's performing the test also doesn't know. So there's absolutely no way that the person who's conducting the test can be influenced. And you can read up about A/B testing or ABX testing.
We have customer followed to the best of their ability that procedure, testing
on the quarter mile
tunes.
stuff. Yeah,
no, 3 tunes on the dyno.
Okay.
Our tune and 2 other competitor tunes, same day, same condition, and all of the plots lined up damn same, because as we've discussed in the past, peak power is.
Yes.
Well, this is the other thing is we talk about this all the time is making peak power or peak power at any given RPM is not that difficult.
Making a pretty dyno is not
there's that
really
too.
that difficult. It's putting it all together and making it a drivable, smooth,
Yes.
repeatable configuration on the road.
Can you drive the car hard on the road? And can you take it to the track, which is where the ultimate test is for us? And we take all of our tunes to the track and we flog them mercilessly, trying to get them to break or fail. And that's always where we see the issues in the tuning crop up is at the track.
Yep.
So yeah, you've heard the term dyno queen. It's a term for a reason because it's really not that hard to make a finicky car perform well on the dyno. How does it drive? How does it perform on the street? How does it perform on the track? What's the long-term reliability, the safety, the throttle response, the throttle control, things like that, the boost control, the smoothness. How does it run in really cold temperatures? How does it run in really hot temperatures? And so many other factors is really what tuning validity comes down to. Now we're confident that our tuning will hold up to anyone else's tuning when it comes to peak power. Again, that's the easy part. I think the first thing we do is we make peak power. That's simple.
And that moves around some depending on what we find in our testing and what we can do repeatedly. So again, maybe there's more on the table on a dyno pole that we chose to have a different consideration on as far as the longevity or a repeatability or in the field the car vary enough that we need to accommodate for a wider swath of calibration issues.
Two quick follow-ups. Someone says, how much variance do you see throughout the day?
A lot.
Quite a bit. It could be 5 to 10%. If it's 45 degrees in the morning and 85 degrees in the afternoon and the humidity changes and the dew point changes, you're going to see typically a huge drop in power as things warm up. And then
Quantify that power.
it could
be
be
horsepower because it's percentage. So,
but on a typical B9 3.2, it could be 5, 10, 15 wheel.
yeah, which is enough to differentiate products.
Well, that's
that's
a big part of the difference.
And this is we spend a really long time trying to isolate these variables and trying to suss out the power improvements so that we can legitimately show you what you're going to be getting at a minimum, essentially.
And this is someone asks, do SAE corrections not accommodate for this? No,
Very poorly.
Not nearly enough, and they're actually pretty bad. I think SAE, I would say typically I don't pay much attention to SAE corrections. However, I would say on normally aspirated motors, they're pretty good.
They can be pretty close. Yeah,
they can be
a
pretty
really good
close.
point. The issue you run into a lot of times with tuned setups is you're not necessarily running the same targeting method that a factory is due to other limitations. So maybe you're limiting boost at a certain point. Maybe you're limiting, you're writing a limit that's not necessarily a calculated torque limit. You have some other constraint that you're in. Your SAE numbers go out the window at that point because you're going to be making maybe the same boost as you did before because of some other limitation, which means it's a bunch more airflow because it's cooler air temp. So your SAE calculation is going to kind of go out the window.
Yeah, on turbo motors, the SAE corrections are not accurate.
Yeah, and then
They just don't.
And then if you start getting into any altitude and trying to account for that, it just is it's a mess.
When you want to talk about inflated, inaccurate dynos,
it's
use SAE corrections at elevation, which some of our competitors do.
Forced induction at elevation with SAE corrections applied is a really hard thing to do accurately.
Someone's asking why did those stock cars vary so much? Wouldn't that all be normalized once they're tuned? I'd love to do a deep dive or a study on this. I like to think someday if I'm just ridiculously rich and I'd just like to open a laboratory and just scientifically analyze various questions like this. But if I had to guess, I would say it's differences in piston ring sealing and the ability of the motor to create compression is what's doing this. Some motors could have carbon buildup or other things too that are changing the power output.
Some may be just a noisier assembly, so there's more active timing intervention being done. Just with all the rotating noise. We've come across this on literally every platform we've ever calibrated. Is you'll have some hot motors that are stand out above all the others for no reason whatsoever. You'll have a bunch that meet in the middle, and you'll have some low liars.
Yeah, but it's a fact that every factory car produces different power. And typically we see more variation than less, and we're always shocked by how two identical stock cars can make the same power. This is nothing new. I mean, I remember years ago, I remember reading an article about brand new Corvettes coming off the production line that had been broken in, that had, they're one of the magazines took 3 relatively brand new Corvettes and drag raced them. And there was several tenths of a second difference between these identical cars. But I think, how different engines break in piston rings break in is really critical to this. Different rolling. How do rolling diameters affect this? They can. Any change to the tire. The rolling diameter isn't so much the issue; it's the compliance of the tire. How much is the tire insulating the torque from the roller? This is like running in sand. The best ideal would if you had like a gear on the hub and it interfaced with a gear on the dyno. And there was a direct
some
one-to-one
lubricated
connection.
gear interface.
Yeah.
Yes. I mean, you put it like a track tire,
Like a
or
synchro
something.
mesh.
Like a performance tire is generally going to impact negatively your dyno numbers. You're going to have a gummy, sticky tire after a dyno pull because that tire's complying with the
want a
dyno
really
roller.
hard
It's
tire.
it's putting heat into the tire, which is energy that's not getting to the roller. So there's a lot of factors that come into play.
Well, I think we're out of time. We have tons of questions.
So I have a ton left.
You guys asked a lot of questions this week, so thank you. I feel like we got through a lot of them, but we will hit all these questions next week, so please tune back in, and we will look forward to seeing you then.
I'm off Monday, so I think
Yeah,
we have to do.
me too.
Okay.
So we'll do it Tuesday next week for anyone who's paying attention.
Yep.
So, thank you very much. Cheers.
Thanks, guys.